we go.
Let's sing outside. We'll wear masks. If there's a place in the adults, we can don't have to do all the same dance.
All right.
Okay.
All righty. We're doing Revelation.
Oh.
I have handouts. I do. I just press there. Let's start right. Go. Get dressed.
17.
Yeah, that is wonderful. Thank you for listening. Thanks for praying.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
All right, Revelation. We are in chapter 17. Could somebody read, sorry as I'm walking through, can somebody read the first 6 verses of chapter 17?
Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of saints, with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement.
All right. Now, John's portrayal of this woman reminds us of a couple things. One is from Jeremiah. Jeremiah actually describes unfaithful Israel as a painted lady. Also, when you think of painted ladies in the Old Testament, you think Jezebel. Remember when Jezebel was, I would imagine, old, her dynasty was continuing on. Remember Jehu was raised up. He's kind of this anti-hero, dark horse, Rambo guy. He's killing all of the seed of Ahab, essentially the Amorite dynasty. Jehu is a Meshuggah. He's this guy filled with passion. The Lord's given him a job to be the next king of northern Israel, and Jehu's going to kill a lot of people, and he's after Jezebel. And when he shows up, Jezebel paints her face. And it's like, woohoo, right? She's trying to seduce him like she's seduced all the nation to Baal worship. She's the one who helped import Baal worship under Ahab and persecute. Remember, she helped lead a persecution of the prophets. She stole Naboth's vineyard for him, for Ahab. She's wicked, right? She is associated not only with spiritual idolatry, which is spiritual religious adultery, she's also kind of associated with just immorality in general, right? And so you have this woman like unfaithful Israel / Jezebel on a beast. Scarlet. We're going to look at all of this. Remember, it's a picture book, not a puzzle book. Let's look at the picture. First thing, sexual immorality. She's astride the beast. That's an R-rated image. I hate to say. Well, I don't hate to say it's in the Bible. It's a right bestiality. Actually, think about Old Testament idolatry. Right, idolatry is spiritual adultery. And it's also, by the way, forging alliances with wicked nations. Right, God in His prophet says, you're looking to Nico as your lover and your savior, instead of me, your bridegroom. What's that? It's adultery. Right? So this woman there's the spiritual adultery going on, an alliance perhaps to a larger power, and certainly idolatry, right? A false religion. Blasphemy written all over herself, right? She's covered in those names. Remember, we talked about what name is on you. What are you sealed with? What are you covered with? The next thing you see is a picture, I think, of empire and wealth. She has jewels, right? She has precious stones. That's wealth. Purple and scarlet. Purple was the most expensive cloth at the time. It was very difficult to make the color purple in the ancient world. Indigo was harvested from conch shells. Right, it was a secret process, and that's why so expensive, which is when you wore the purple, you were the emperor. Right? Very royal imperial colors. We're also going to see another office had purple and scarlet in the ancient world. Because when you look at the vestments of the priests in the Old Testament temple, the main colors are indigo and scarlet. There's blue, purple, and scarlet. And indigo, it's kind of, actually violet's more of the blue-purple. But this picture of temple colors, right? They didn't change colors like we do every season. The uniform was mostly purple, scarlet, and blue. If you've ever seen a recreation of the priest's vestments, it's very interesting. That's very vibrant color, and she has some of these vibrant colors on her. There's an image somewhat of Gentiles, because you have many waters. You have nations. You have lots of trade, power, commerce, and world influence, right? Waters are where trade happens, Congress, economics, right? Flowing in and out of. That's imperial, lots of nations coming in and out. We're going to see many nations in a second, by the way. It's a counterfeit. Counterfeit imagery. It's like other imagery of the real thing that we see in Revelation. Here's some of the counterfeit stuff. She's a consort instead of a bride. Right? So we've seen a bride. We're going to see a bride. She's not a bride. She's a woman of the night. There's the many waters. We're going to see in a second. The voice of like many waters. When we hear voice of many waters, what have we typically seen in Revelation? The praise and worship of God from His saints and from His angels. She gets many waters praising the beast. Her, right? This sort of pseudo approximation of what God gets and what He gives, right? Counterfeit. She's the mother of. We've already seen a mother, haven't we? Who was the mother we met in Revelation? Do you remember? The woman travailing, clothed with the sun, moon, and stars, and she gives birth to the man-child. The dragon. What color is the dragon? Do you remember? Do you remember what color the dragon is? Scarlet. And the dragon wants to eat the man-child. And that's a reference to Jesus. Mother Zion. Right? Mother of us all, Jerusalem above. Jesus is a descendant of Israel while also being the Savior and King of Israel. He's the son of Israel who's also... Right? This lady is a mother of what? Whoredoms and abominations. Right? Instead of what's... Right? In God's way of doing things, husband, wife, produce a child. Right? We're totally messed up on this now as our culture, but the way God makes it, right? Husband, wife, man, cleaving together, producing child. It's this horrible, right? She's in union with something that's not even her species, producing horrible abominations. Right? If you've read mythology, that's often, usually terrible things occur is how you get minotaurs and other monsters. It's some sort of terrible congress between supernatural and the human, which I think actually might be referencing some sort of real stuff, thinking in Genesis, right? The sons of God and the daughters. And that's kind of, where do you want to go with Genesis is the question there. But what we see is she's a mother of, but she's not a good mother like this mother from earlier on. There's a drunken orgy instead of a wedding supper. Right? She's drunk with wine. We're going to see later on there's a wedding supper of the Lamb. So instead of a celebratory, pure wedding supper of joy, there's this salacious orgy in the old sense of the word, right? This drinking party. She's covered in jewels and pearls and gold, like Jerusalem. When we see the city Jerusalem descend, the gates are 12 enormous pearls, and she has a foundation and is covered with jewels or precious stones with her streets of gold. This harlot has similar stuff. She has her pearl earrings on, or her pearl necklace, whatever, her jewels, and her gold. She is a counterfeit bride. She's not even a bride. She is in the wilderness. Did you see that? This is where he sees her. He sees her in a wilderness. Where did we see a woman in the wilderness? Well, just a few chapters earlier, right? God made a way of escape. He gave wings to Mother Zion to flee to the wilderness from the beast. So this woman also is in the wilderness. Somehow she has a story of wilderness with her. We'll get there. Who is this? Keep thinking, who is this? This is a picture of someone. Instead of being a mother to the son, she is the mother of whoredoms and abominations. Right? In fact, let's go on. There's a picture of persecution. She is drunk on the blood of the martyrs, right? That's clear. It's clear persecution here. Whereas the Holy Mother Zion delivers her baby who is protected from being eaten. Babylon feeds on God's children, drinking their blood. That's kind of a counterfeit, but it's also this persecution, right? Mother Zion, in that old chapter, right? She gave birth to the son. He's caught up into safety. She's taken off to safety. This one is feeding on the children, right? In fact, I would argue she is the one who helped bring about the ultimate martyrdom. That's where I'm going with this picture. There's arrogance. Why did I say there's arrogance? Because drinking means a sense of permanence, of the work being done. Things will remain this way, she thinks, right? In the Bible, when things are right, when there's Sabbath rest, a man sits under his vine and enjoys the fruit of his vine. He drinks wine under the fruit of his vine, surrounded by his family and his household and the flourishing of God's world. That's like the ideal on an individual level. Like a man enjoying the fruit of God's good creation, which he has stewarded, cultivated, worked with, and crafted something, and he's enjoying that. That's what Noah does, actually. And who ruins it is Ham. Right? This image of Sabbath rest. This harlot is like, well, this is how things be. The work's been done. Took care of the saints. And I'm always going to be here like this. I'm the queen. Right? Do you see that arrogance? She's covered with blasphemies. So blasphemies are often arrogant, right? Against God. Impurity, right? Sexual immorality, obviously. She's also consuming blood. Remember the Old Testament law? No black sausage. You never consume blood. So she's ritually impure. She's sexually impure. She produces abominations. Now, let's talk about the abomination of desolation. When some people read that phrase, they think it's going to be one specific act that has not occurred yet. Right? They think it's probably going to be the head of the UN or some demon-possessed pope going into a rebuilt third temple of Jerusalem, which isn't going to happen, by the way. God said it's not. Right? He said there's not going to be rebuilding this temple on Zion. That's what Jesus said. You can believe Jesus or you can believe the dispensationalists. They think he's going to go in there and do some sacrilegious ritual. Right? He does a Yom Kippur, and right, it's this whole false thing of pollution. That's not how you read the Bible. The Abomination of Desolation is a genre or type of thing that happens in history. It's happened before. It will happen again. The one that Daniel talks about, there's an Abomination of Desolation. It was foretelling when Andronicus, the Seleucid, the Greco-Hellenistic guy came in during the Maccabees, and he sacrificed a pig in the Holy of Holies. Or on the altar of God, I should say, not the Holy of Holies, the altar of God. Polluting the temple. And it was in the sense of, this isn't a historical, it's a category. It's a sacrilege so horrifying that it calls out for and receives a judgment of desolation. It's so bad, you have to clear out the whole thing to start over. Right? It's like when the land spits out the inhabitants, or everything kind of burnt, scorched earth, and then you have to start over. In the time of the Maccabees, what happened is there were no prophets to say, what do we do with this polluted altar? There were no oracles. So they said, all we can do is tear it down and build a new one. It's desolate. Make it desolate, rebuild anew. It's totally... And the judgment, of course, was the Maccabean revolt, right? The hammer defeating and driving out the Greeks. Desolation and abomination. So, abomination, desolation is something that is so bad, right? You need to clear out the whole thing. It desolates everything around it. Pollutes everything around it. A polluted spring. A sacrilege, a blasphemous, abominable act. Typically religious. Where you just, what do? You have to bleach the whole thing. Alright? She produces multiple, right? Abominations. So that's impurity after impurity, terrible impurities. The abomination we find out, particularly in this instance, is consuming the blood of the martyrs. It's an abominable thing to kill the Christian for their faith, to persecute them for bearing the name of Christ. And God's way of seeing things, right? They're His temple. They're His bride. They're His children. And you are drinking their blood. It's foul. Utterly foul. Also kind of this idea, one commentator even said it's like, you're not supposed to boil a kid in its mother's milk. This is the kind of woman that would do that. Boil her kid and her child, her offspring, in her own milk. Because of the way he reads it and how I read it too. I'll get there in a second. Satanically motivated. Both the beast and the woman are scarlet like the dragon. Get it? It's a picture. Right? They're wearing the red tee. They're wearing the red jersey. The scarlet jersey. Right? Easy. Easy one. Alright. And putting it all together, we see a union of power and wealth with religion. False religion. Revelation, that's like the big thing I want you to see. Revelation reveals to us these perverse unions of political power, particularly cultural power, and money, or wealth, and false religion. And they feed on each other, and they attack the church.
Really? Definitely got that one.
Surprise, right? That's why I say it's always a permanent relevance. It was relevant back then, it's relevant now. This is for you. Now, what is this Lady Babylon? She's a city, right? Babylon, that's a city. Now there's two I think the two best options for the prostitute are these. First of all, Rome, or in general, the city of man. Right? Man building his own city, building his Babel. Let's build a tower together to rise up to God and rebel. Kind of an arrogant rebellion, right? That makes sense, right? That's what Babel means. And I say, and so in some sense, it's this recurring thing over and over, right? The city of man going off track, attacking the church, false religion, all of that power, trying to be the kingdom of God, but isn't, tries to have ultimate allegiance like God does, or the church should have. That makes sense to me. That's actually most of my life, when I started seriously thinking about this. That's where I was. I want to add a new kind of, right, thinking in terms of the original audience and what John might have been saying. It could also be Jerusalem, unbelieving Jerusalem. The temple, like I keep going back to the Sanhedrin temple system, right? Because it's a woman in the wilderness, right? She's this one who can claim the name, I'm Israel. And when push comes to shove, the Messiah shows up. Part of her, right? Part of her is the true mother, and it goes with him in the wilderness, right? She's persecuted for his sake. But there's another aspect of Israel that says, we have no king but Caesar. Crucify him. Right? This is a primarily Jewish audience, right? Most of the church in the first generation is Jewish. How painful that is. Right? Your cousins, your brothers, your sisters, your mother, your father, you're probably at odds with each other at this moment in history because of Jesus. They're on one side, you're on the other, and we're already a persecuted religious minority, and I'm rocking the boat by bringing in the Gentiles into the covenant, and they want to sick Rome on us because we are screwing things up. We're messing up the alliance, the compromises we have, the structure we have, and what it means to be faithful according to what the Sanhedrin are telling us, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, all of that, right? Crucify him. We have no other king but Caesar. Really? Yeah. And think about it this way. The beast is Caesar. Rome was 7 hills, right? We're going to see 7 hills mentioned. The city. And there's an alliance between the beast and the woman. Here's, again, I've said it last chapter. I think we're seeing another perspective. When the Jewish establishment is able to convince Rome that the Christians are not actually Israelites. They don't get the religious freedom that you give to Jews. Sick them. You cast them out of the synagogue, as Jesus said. That's terrifying for a Jewish person. You are tossed out of the synagogue. You have lost your legal privileges. Rome's on you like white blood cells. You are a threat to the common order now. You're atheists. You're weird. You don't even offer blood sacrifices. Right? Everybody does that. Even the Jews do that. Right? They're offering sacrifices in their temple. You're not. You're weird. You're strange. You will not conform. You must conform. And so, there's a sense in, please turn Jesus over to Pilate. Turn Jesus over to Herod. Turn this Paul over. Let's get Romans. Please kill these Christians. In fact, our Bible condemns what they're doing. Right? They can claim just as much authority, right? To an outsider, who's got the real authority? Well, these guys are the council. They're the Sanhedrin. So that's the real deal. And so we're going to kill the Christians. Right? The union there, their perverse alliance. And who has convinced both the beast and the woman to go after the saints? Who's behind all of it? Satan. Good. Scarlet, right? They are on Team Satan now. That's what I think is going on in this immediate context. But you don't have to work too hard to see it throughout history. Or even around us now. Alright? That's the big picture. Verses 7 through 18.
But the angel said to me, "Why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not, and yet is. Here is the mind which is wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with beasts. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled.
All right. Still, what's going on here? Let's get through some of this. Again, picture. First, the first picture we see, or the phrase, verse 8, it's an inversion of Jesus. Remember, Jesus is the one who is, was, and is to come. When God shows up to Moses in the burning bush, he says what? What's his name? I am. Existence here and now, always. Even before anything else was, I am. Jesus, right? Before Abraham was, I am. Like being as essence, right? As existence as essence, as the old scholastics would say, and they're right. Right? His I amness. And then he was, yes, in the past, he is to come, right? An arrival, Perusia. The beast was, is not, sorry, I don't have that written down, a lack of existence in a sense, comes and goes. Right? A play on it, but not quite the same. He will come, but then he goes, right? When Jesus says, I am to come, he doesn't go. Right? Do you see that? Marveling shows up again. There's a certain sort of adoration that comes from the non-believer that has such infernal worldly power. And John has to be taught how to react to visions. He's taught things by the visions he has. No, don't worship me, John. Worship this guy. Don't marvel at the woman, John. Right? He needs his heart, his vision, his mind and affections to be corrected. Anybody here read Dante? Right? With Dante, what does Virgil always have to do? And Beatrice. Right? Don't do this. This is what this means, Dante, not that. This is how you're supposed to react, Dante, not this way. As they go through hell and purgatory and all that. This is the same thing. John, don't marvel. One commentator, I just thought this was a really interesting line. If this is Jerusalem, and right, John is Jewish. Ma, is that you? Ooh. Ooh. Right? There's this faithful mother, and then there's this other woman. Has she been seduced while in the wilderness, came back from the land of Shinar, and now she's on the beast? Woo! Right? Going, Ma, is that you? Right? That's just really interesting to me, this kind of woo! Like, why does it have John's attention? Right? He doesn't go into graphic detail. When he sees Jesus, he talks about every single piece of Jesus. His eyes, his hair, the girdle around him, his feet, his clothing. He doesn't do that with this woman. He just has like a vague picture, and he said, John, don't marvel. Right? John's allowed to marvel the image of the Ancient of Days, but not this. I think the worldly marvel at the woman, at Lady Babylon, Rome Eternal, right? Or our system, our holy way of life, tradition, right? And then there's an invitation to be wise. Verse 9, we need wisdom. Consider how this harlot is like Lady Folly in Proverbs, by the way, right? Lady Folly is this prostitute woman, and he's like, John, be wise. Listener, reader, be wise. See who this woman and this beast for what they really are. Then, 7 heads. Okay, let's get to the interpretation. We got horns and heads, all right? 7 heads, first of all, 7 hills. It's hard not to realize that's Rome somehow, right? The city of 7 hills. Everybody knew that. We still don't know that is the city of 7 hills. And the harlot is astride or riding high on the Roman system and power. We again have 2 options. We have in Rome, the city, a cultural achievement that lives on the system, lives on the empire. That's where I used to be. The other one is unbelieving Judaism uses Roman power for their ultimately satanic agenda against true Israel, which is the church. Take your pick. I'm in the latter group now. I used to be the former. Won't get mad at you if you're going to be either of those, but I just think that those are the most, they seem to fit the picture the best. Horns and heads. The horns and the heads are kings and emperors. Right? The horn, a symbol of power, or a symbol of authority. Daniel does this too. These kings are horns, and there's this numbers, and there's 2 options for you. The 7 and 10 are obviously symbolic, right? A picture of perfection and wholeness. 10 commandments, 7 days, right? All that. The other option is that you can literally count down how many emperors from Julius Caesar to Jesus, and then afterward, or how many empires, right? How many world empires that persecuted or dealt with Israel, Egypt, or do you want to start with Babylon? Like, right? You can count these out. I will let you do, if you want to do a more literal reading, right? I'm counting out the empires, I'm counting out the kings and the emperors. You can make it fit. A lot of them land on Nero, like as kind of the big point when things really start heating up for the church. And also, there's the Claudians and others leading also up to when the beast and the nations turn on the woman. Remember, that's how it kind of finishes. The beast gets a mind to turn on the woman, the whore riding upon him. Think about that a second. Despite being several heads, they're all of one mind in verse 13, manifesting and handing over power and authority to the beast and going to war with the Lord Jesus and his saints. Right? Of all the things they have, even though they're different people, the one thing they have in common, they're going to go to war. They have this agenda that God's using providentially, by the way. Waters, as hinted before, have to do with many nations and peoples and languages within the empire. Right? All roads lead to where? Rome. And all those roads go to all sorts of places, right? Now, verse 16. The axis of evil turns upon itself. The horns and the beast versus the harlot. What did they do to the harlot?
Eat her.
What?
Did they eat her?
They eat her. What else they do? They burn her. They cut her up. They skin her. That is sacrifice language. The horns of the kings are also the horns of some sort of altar, right? Remember, altars have these corner horns that you did certain things with during the rituals of the temple, and other religions too have horns on the altar. She gets the Jezebel treatment too, right? When Jezebel calls down to Jehu, Jehu doesn't say, what does Jehu say? He's like, who's up there? Some servant says, like, throw her down. And right, she gets trampled down, her blood splatters all over the place, the dogs lap up her blood. Eaten by the dogs. Similar, right? She's a Jezebel. Now, and we see God put it in their hearts to do that. Right? John says, God puts it in their hearts to do that. What is this about? Again, I'll show, this is the most helpful, I think. I tend to see this as pointing at the eventual suppression and conquest of Jerusalem and the temple system. Highlighted, again, Pinnacle 80-70. Right? We're not doing temple stuff anymore. You kick the Christians out, the actual temple out of the temple. The actual Spirit of God indwells the Christians You kick them out, so you're just this building with these sacrifices. I'm just going to tear it all down, because you're not the real thing anyway, right? That's kind of where so much of the New Testament points toward. The fall of the city preludes and heralds the fall of many other cities. The kings of the land, I think, in this are Israelite leadership, right? I'm always talking about the land, Israel, the seas, the streams are Gentiles, right? I'm going to run with that. Another good option would be, so if you don't want to say, no, this isn't talking about 80, 70, Bart, get off of it. Another option would be, this is how Rome does decline civilizationally. She turns in upon herself in civil strife, internal vice, the conquest of nations. Other nations like Huns and Goths and Visigoths come in and take their part of her, right? And even possibly conversion from paganism to Christianity, because then she's conquered, right? She's consumed away in all of her wickedness, and now the emperor has been baptized. That's one. Eusebius of Caesarea actually thought that. It's like, it's all about Constantine. Love Constantine. It's all about Constantine. And I don't quite agree, but the problem we have with this is, when did Rome fall? Right. Where do you mark the fall of Rome? And that's a historical bugbear. I mean, the historians are still arguing. Is it when the Germans make a king? Is it when Constantine converts? Is it when Constantinople falls, 1453? Right? I mean, when does Rome fall? Like, in what way? Right? And that's why I find it more helpful to identify this with unfaithful Israel. That's kind of what actually pushed me to this. Does that make any sense? This is somehow religion mixed with power and politics. It turns in upon itself. But before it turns in upon itself, it attacks the church. Does that seem familiar at all from history? Even the 20th century had several examples of this. It's got a lot of language, so I can't recommend it. But I've seen scenes from, is it The Death of Stalin? It's The Death of Stalin. It's a black comedy, like a dark, dark comedy. But it's all about, right before Stalin died, it's like the worst it was in communist Russia. Like, everybody's afraid of everybody. Knives are all out. All conspiracies. It's just full totalitarian horror. And then Stalin dies, and then there's like, the head's been cut off the snake, and there's all this shuffling and around and turning in on each other. Right? And kind of the gaps in it kind of reminds me of that. Like, they all turn in on each other. Right? This terrible, it seemed like a totalitarian monolith, right? Inseparable, crushing state. And then a little change happens. A man dies. As all men die. And then all of a sudden, everything's shaken up. That's what it kind of feels like too, doesn't it? Right? Well, she's with her wine. I have triumphed over the saints. And then, boom, something changes. And she gets the Jezebel treatment. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I hope so. And the Bible helps us navigate that. It helps us when we when it seems like that woman, the harlot, is triumphing. She's it. She wants your amazement. You're able to think in the long term and say, you know what? This isn't how it ends. That's how we practice it, right? Any other questions or thoughts or concerns? Good.
I really like the stuff you pointed out from the commentaries. I've listened on this particular sheet, but I don't have it on the other. Is it this big?
What?
The book.
It's 2 volumes. I have it on Logos. My favorite one. Are you talking about the commentary?
Yes.
I have several that I like. I've really my mind's been blown by a brand new one by Peter Lightheart. Peter Lightheart spent all his life looking at the imagery of the Old Testament for the most part. He's done some new. And this is kind of, I feel like it's his magnum opus. He's already written on so much about the Bible. He's got such a mind for the imagery of the themes of the Bible. And then he's like, okay, now it's D-Day. I mean, this is Revelation just totally pivots on all of this. reason we don't read Revelation well in our society today is because we don't know our Bibles, particularly the Old Testament. And it's killing us. We don't know our Old Testament. We don't know how to read the prophets and the oracles and the Psalms and the redeemed history of Israel. And so Revelation, we bring in our baggage to the text, and we try to read it from there, and you can't do it that way. You got to put on Bible goggles and see it as the Bible is portrayed. And then it starts making so much more sense, and it becomes immediately more practically relevant and understandable and hopeful, like the gospel should be.
God tells us to read Revelation, so
It is there for your learning, your encouragement. That 2 Timothy 3:16, 17, Revelation qualifies. It's not meant to befuddle you or say, gosh, I don't know anything. It's to invite you in, and then when you're in the midst of it, you've got the imagination, the vocabulary, and the hope, and the understanding, right? Light's coming. It's here, actually. It's triumphed. It continues to triumph, even when it seems really dark. Right? Yeah, Jeff.
Father, could you roll back to verse 5 and what was written on the forehead?
Blasphemies. Mystery.
This particular...
Mystery.
Yeah, mystery.
Mysterion.
What is that?
Typically, something that gets our astonishment or attention, you can't quite fully plumb its depths. It's hidden away. You can keep going at it. A couple mysteries are in the Bible besides that one, right? There's a bad mystery there, right? It kind of draws us in. What makes Rome tick? What makes all this? How does it all go? And you're marveled by it, right? People are obsessed with power. That's what I see is mystery. And it's a mystery, too, because this is, if it's Jerusalem, it's this nation that's gone through all this long history of covenant faithfulness with God, and still she forsakes him. The bridegroom shows up and says, will you marry me? Some say yes. A lot say yes, in fact, right? John the Baptist was all about getting those people to say yes. Say yes to the dress. The dress of Jesus' righteousness. Get married. And Jesus said, I'm going to come back, pull you in my arms, and take you across the threshold when I come back again. We'll have a wedding supper, right? You see that? Right? The one that says no. Right? And I want this guy. And the mystery of that. Why would you do that? It's like the personality of Gaston with the looks of the beast. Right? Why would you do that? It's befuddling. There are other befuddling mysteries that are good befuddling mysteries. How has God brought Jew and Gentile together? That's what Paul talks about the mystery of the gospel, right? He's broken down the wall of hostility where we're supposed to either you ain't and you ain't. And God broke that down through Jesus. Thank God, right? Says the goy boy, right? The other thing is a mystery is actually, at least in the early church, it's not really used this way necessarily in the Bible. It's the sacraments. The deep realities conveyed through bread and wine? Right? Befuddling. How? Right? But she has mystery. Right? And it's befuddling. She's befuddling. That's how I read it. There's a couple ways you could. Also, the idolatry always has this element, especially the Gnostic at the time. Right? The mystery cults come into the secret knowledge and what's done behind closed doors and all the unseemly things that occur. And she certainly is doing an unseemly thing. So there's a couple things I will throw on your grill, and you can flip over to whatever degree, rare, medium that you want. Yeah, grill it up.
Yeah.
See, and that's why I didn't address it. It's kind of there's all over. It could be a lot of things. But
What is the Greek there?
what?
What is the Greek?
Mysterion. Mysterion. It's actually interesting. We use mystery. We're using that Greek word. What does it mean? The same thing. Your English word came from it. Sorry. But using the New Testament language typically. And it pulls on old biblical ideas, the befuddling thing. Psalms have that too. Proverbs, right? These befuddling situations, the foolishness of man, or the wonder how God's world kind of works on, right? The young man with a maid, deep things of the world. The sort of thing that wise old men sit down, or wise old women sit down, look at the wall, drink their coffee, and think about. Right? Other thoughts? Okay. It'll tire you out. Like when Israel wrestles God, it will tire you out. You think about these befuddling things. Good, like why did they do this? This terrible, stupid things, wonderful things. Why did God save me? Or why did they take this disastrous path, even though it never turns out well? Right?
I tell you what tires you out is having seen and looked at the dispensational view. And who would come?
It's despair, utter despair. It's countdown to is Jesus going to win or not? Well, no, we've got to do all these things to set off the bomb.
Unbelievable.
Let's not set off the bomb, but also we need to set off the bomb. It's this kind of death pact thing. It's like, that's not how the Bible works. And you are bringing your own stuff, your own agenda there, comes
and
from the
chart.
1800s.
You gotta have a chart.
Oh
my gosh, the chart. Oh, it's just unbelievable.
And it's like that and it shows that it's of no relevance until it actually starts going down. And when it starts going down, you can't do anything about it, so why is it here? Why is it here? It's of no benefit. It's just telling you sometime 2,000 years in the future. So John's original audience says no benefit, except it's going to happen. You're going to win. And the one thing you can say is Jesus coming back, you're going to win. That's okay. That's the one thing we can all agree on. But so much else. It's like, what's the point? It's contrived. It's not happening. It is happening. Do we want it to happen or not? It's just this really, and it's a confusing way, the way they have to dismiss the Old Testament. The poison in it is how they treat the Old Testament. That's actually Charlie Camlin, who's a mentor to me and Tom and Scott. He used to be that, right, in a big way. I don't know if Scott was too, probably. I was in it for a while. It's dispensationalism. It was very popular. Dallas Theological, Ryrie commentaries, and study Bible. They had the Ryrie study Bible, very nice. And it's just shoehorning all this stuff in. And the way you have to violate how Jesus and the apostles, and ignore how they read and interpret and apply the Bible. And then how you basically, Old Testament doesn't really mean much except some moral examples. And it's something that is put on pause. New Testament shows up, and we hit play again. And we're going back to the old order of things. Back to ritual Judaism again. It's like, did Paul not write Hebrews or what?
Yeah.
Right? It's this big problem. 2 books, if this is like what are you talking about? What are you going off on? What's a good book about this stuff and how to read the Bible differently than our dispensationalist friends? F.F. Bruce. It's the Old New Testament fulfillment of Old Testament themes. I think I have the book. I can let you borrow it. And the big stuff, if you want a big, is G.K. Beale's New Testament use of the Old. It's one book, folks. It goes together, and it's not. This section goes on pause for a while until there's like a time of mercy and grace that's totally different and broken off from the other. It's not some sort of fulfillment. It's a break off, and then you hit the breaker again, and then we're back on Old Testament for salvation stuff.
That's why
right? Jesus is the point. Jesus and what he did is the point of the Old. And unfortunately, our dispensationalist friends, that is what's being lost, and that's why, as young dispensationalists go on to study the Bible in more depth and richness, they leave. It has to change, or it's just, it doesn't make sense as you, and folks do this too. They enter into it that way. It's very exciting. You're in on the secret, right? It's the secret knowledge Gnostic thing. I'm in on the secret of how the world's going to end, and no one else knows except us happy few. And instead, that's the appeal of it. And then it's kind of like, but this isn't of any discipling value. And where does Jesus somehow fit in to the whole thing? Sorry, I've gone on and on. It's in the water.
Mm-hmm.
When you have somebody talking about the rapture, or rebuilding the temple, or rebreeding the red heifer, or microchips as the beast's mark, right? I'm sorry, it's a lot of that. Or marking when Jesus is going to come back. That's not what the Bible's telling us to do. It's so much better. It is so much better than that. Anyway, sorry to go off on that. That's just love you guys. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the faithfulness of your word and your faithfulness to us, and how you promised to bring out fruitfulness from your word, including today's reading. We pray we would not marvel and admire that which is wicked and evil, a counterfeit, but rather love that which is true and good, and be warned against the problems and the deceptions that counterfeits offer us that seem so good at first. May we be vigilant and hopeful. May we triumph in you, the Lamb of God. It's in your name we do pray.
Great.
I know.